Good afternoon. It's nice to see you. I'm 1 minute late. I do apologise. My Wi-Fi's been playing up a little bit late recently. My name's Sam, and if you are in my Facebook group, then you're probably interested, or you think you ought to be interested, in this life stage called menopause or perimenopause. But often people are very muddled about what is perimenopause, what is menopause, and they hear some conflicting opinions. And so I have decided that on Wednesday lunchtimes, when I can, I'm going to do a Q&A where I answer either two or three specific questions that people have sent in, or I talk about a topic. I'm probably only going to talk for about 10 minutes. I'm not going to bore the pants off you. And occasionally we'll make that Q&A a Zoom one, so you can actually jump in and have a chat with me, because I think chatting with people is always much nicer. And sometimes it's just me talking and hoping that somebody's there and somebody's getting some benefit from these chats. I don't do this type of chat on Instagram. And I don't do this type of chat on a Facebook page. I only do it in my group. Why? Because I get a bit nervous. I hate it when people write to me and say, oh, you shouldn't be doing that kind of exercise at your age, Sam. You're too old for it, or any other thing. Whereas when I'm with my group, I know that you're here for a reason and that you're going to trust me and you're not going to overly criticize the things that I say. So today's topic is perimenopause. What is it? What is the perimenopause? Is it a term that is new to you, or is it something that you've heard for the last 2 or 3 years? Well, the menopause is when your periods have stopped for 12 months. So when you haven't had a period at all for 12 months, you're said to be in menopause. And the perimenopause is all the time that leads up to that. And I've been doing this working with women for about 8 years. And when I first started the Midlife Makeover, most of the people who came to me for my advice or my support were in their very late 40s and probably in their early 50s, because they had got to such a stage where they were noticing symptoms all the time. But actually, when I talked to them, those symptoms had been around for 10, 12 years. And that was the perimenopause. Now that more and more people are talking about this life stage, it's actually brilliant, because I think the perimenopause is a really good time to prepare and to make tweaks or changes to your lifestyle so that the way you feel post-menopausally is so much better. So actually having the awareness and more people talking about this really important life stage is really good. So the perimenopause is the 10 to 15 years that leads up to you having not had a period for 12 months. When does it happen? Well, I often talk to people in their very late 30s, early 40s. But often what happens is people start talking to friends, or they start listening to something, or perhaps they watch the Davina program, or perhaps you've ended up here. And I say to you, this is a symptom, this is a symptom, this is a symptom. And you think, gosh, actually, yeah, I remember that 2 or 3 years ago. So it starts any time, in fact, from your mid to late 30s right through until your late 40s. And most people, by the time they've got to their early 50s, have noticed some changes, not all bad, some changes in their body or how they're feeling it. What causes it? In this live today, I'm not going to go deep into the science behind the perimenopause, because I think what's really interesting is for you to know about the symptoms, the sort of day-to-day effect on you. But it's really important to know a little bit about what happens or why it happens. So it is our hormones, estrogen and progesterone, which go up and down throughout our monthly cycle and cause all sorts of things to happen and to cause you to have a period. And from the time that we go through puberty and your body settles into adulthood and potentially pregnancy, those hormones go up and down and you have a period, you don't get pregnant or you do get pregnant, and then the hormones come up again, and then you're fertile, and then they go back down again. And I suppose if you think about having two taps, an estrogen tap and a progesterone tap, those taps are turned on fully. So the right amount of estrogen is coming out and the right amount of progesterone is coming out, and also other hormones that are going on, testosterone particularly. But as we get older and our ovaries and our body starts to age, instead of the tap dripping out at the flow rate that it's supposed to, it starts to splutter. And the amount of estrogen and progesterone that we produce starts, instead of being a steady trickle at the right time, starts to spurt and then stop and spurt and then stop. And so some months you might have a cycle that isn't 28 days, it's sort of 30, 35 days, and the period's really heavy. And then the next month you might bleed after 21 days or 18 days, but there's nothing very much. So the cause of it is the imbalance and the change and fluctuations, particularly in two hormones, estrogen and progesterone. So instead of the flow of those hormones being as it used to be, it's starting to wane. You may see images on social media where they show about 10 or 15 women, sort of cartoon women or outline women, and they show the woman at 25 with her estrogen right up here, and then she goes down to about being 80 and it goes right down here, as if it goes like that. But it doesn't actually. If it were that simple, you'd know what was going on. It goes up and down and up and down and up and down and up and down in a downward trend, but it doesn't just literally fall off a cliff. Which is why you notice some things are worse than other things at different times of the month. So how do you know? I often think that perimenopause is a retrospective diagnosis. That if I say to you, have you noticed that you cry at everything? Oh yeah, actually I've been doing that for a while. Have you noticed that you've started avoiding driving on the motorway? Or you get worried if there's a queue of people behind you and you've got to get your card out and pay. Your anxiety for some things has become heightened. Anxiety for anything. Have you noticed that you've got a funny itchy bit on your back? Or that your ears are itchy? Or that your vagina is getting a bit drier when used to be that everything was quite juicy? Now it sort of all doesn't feel quite right. And they are the signs that your hormones are fluctuating in a downward trend and that your perimenopause is starting to show its face. Now, estrogen in particular has 300 functions in your body, literally from your toes right up to your head. So it can be you get hair loss, you can get hair loss on your eyebrows, you can get dry eyes, you can get itchy ears. Actually your gums start having an effect, your skin. I would go on and on and on, but it sounds really doom and gloom. It doesn't need to be. And I think that when you understand why this is happening, you can start to make some changes and decide what changes you want to make. So how can you help yourself if you've identified that these symptoms are starting to occur? There's two ways. There's things you can do yourself, and then there's support that you could take from a medical professional. So what can you do yourself? The things that you can do yourself will not only help you right now, but I can promise you they will help you right into your 80s and 90s and maybe even your hundreds. You can buy a birthday card, can't you, for people who are 106 now. So the changes that you slowly put in now will have a really positive effect in the future. You can start to look at your diet, and I use that word in a very general way. You can start to look at what you eat and think, am I really nourishing my body in honesty? Have I had too many late nights? Do I eat too much beige food? Is there too much processed food in my diet? Could I change it to be slightly more Mediterranean, known to be really good for our brain and brain fog? Could I change it so that I'm actually having less wine o'clock in the middle of the week? Could I change it to have less sugar, which is very inflammatory, which means that you get inflammation in various areas? Could I overhaul my diet and make it more about being nourishing? And I'm not saying you give up all the things you love, you don't, but you have them when you've got time to really enjoy them rather than stuffing them in just because. Could you look at your stress levels? Now, Most of the women that I work with in the perimenopause are right at the bottom of the pile for who looks after them. They look after everybody else. They are the yes person. They're on the committee at school. They're organising the sleepovers. They're organising the end of term ball. They're organising sports day, community events, sitting on boards of all sorts of things. They say yes to everything. But really, there's nobody looking after them. And if you don't start to think that it's important to have ways to look after you, then at some point you're going to burn out. So practicing reducing the stress in your life in a variety of ways. On my Move Over Menopause program, the long program, which starts again in September, we look at all of the things that could be adding stress to your life, whether it's saying yes to picking up your teenagers from the station when they could quite easily walk, whether it's being the one who always does all the cooking and all the shopping, anything. We look at ways of reducing that stress. Because if you can reduce your stress, you'll end up sleeping better. Sleep's a problem. And the hormones that you've got left, if the general trend is down, will be able to do what they're meant to do. Because if you're under too much stress, those hormones go to make cortisol, which is what we produce when we're stressed. And then they're being used up in other ways. So let's get them doing what they're meant to do. And then, and you've probably heard me talk about this, what about your movement and exercise? Do you take time to get outside every day for at least 10 minutes? Do you do things that make your heart rate go up, which is what we need to do, whether it's jogging, running, cycling, or gardening? And what do you do that builds muscle? Because believe it or not, when we get to our 40s, we stop building muscle. You get this bingo wing here. Your muscle levels decline. And that's when people start to have a fall. Remember that word, have a fall, and end up breaking a bone because they can't put out this strong arm to protect them. So thinking about your diet, your stress, and your exercise are things that you can do yourself. And I can help you with that. But what about putting those hormones back? Now, let me just tell you, a lot of people say to me, I'm just going to go and have a blood test. Well, your blood test will tell you what the results are of your hormones on that day. They won't tell you what the results were last week or next week. So blood tests are fairly unreliable. Now, if you are under 40, they will do a blood test. They'll probably do a couple of blood tests, because if your hormones have gone down so low that you're noticing perimenopausal symptoms, there are risks that your heart and your bones are not protected. And so the person who is under 40 and displaying symptoms of the perimenopause needs to be protected, probably with hormone replacement therapy, so that they don't get osteoporosis or cardiac problems later on in their life. So let's talk about sort of between 40, 45 and over. If you've got a doctor who wants to be absolutely sure what's going on, they might do blood tests. But they may not always. So when you go to the doctor, the questions they're going to ask you are, what signs and symptoms are you displaying? So you say, I'm not sleeping very well, I'm having hot flushes, my anxiety is through the roof, and any of the other signs and symptoms you're displaying. And then they're likely to say to you, are you still having periods? And if you say yes, the old-fashioned advice was, well, go away and come back to me when you haven't had a period for 12 months. That is now completely out of the window. If you are displaying perimenopausal symptoms that you're finding debilitating, a switched-on, well-educated GP will say, would you like to discuss HRT and how it might help you? And you might say yes. I'm not going to talk about HRT particularly here now, because that's for another live, and I'm very happy to do it in another live. But what I want you to know is that you don't have to not be having periods for you to go onto HRT. And once you've started it, if you choose to start it, you don't have to come off it after 5 years or 10 years or any set amount, as long as there's no contraindications for you, if that's what you want to do. So HRT is an option that an external medical professional can help you with. And it's only part of the whole health thing. The things that you can do play a massive part. People often ask me, are there any supplements you can take? And there are a few supplements that I suggest that people put into their life generally. Vitamin D is one of them, particularly if you live in the UK or Ireland or somewhere where we don't actually get that much sunshine. Magnesium is a relaxing supplement. You can add magnesium to your bath via Epsom salts, you can add it onto your skin via a cream or a spray, or you can take it orally. If you go to your health food shop and ask them for magnesium, they can give you magnesium. So they are the two things that I would start by thinking about, along with this Mediterranean diet. And then further down the road, there might be other things that you would add in, like flax seeds or linseeds in the shape of seeds to your diet. They are plant-based estrogens. So a whistle-stop tour of the perimenopause, mostly to reassure you that it's a very real thing. And actually, for 15 years, that might be the hardest bit. As soon as your periods stop, you might think, oh, thank goodness for that. I can now get on with the second part of my life. The Japanese call it the second spring. How lovely. A time where you can actually move forward with a nice clear head and think, right, this is who I am now. I'll be back doing more of these lunchtime Facebook Lives on a Wednesday, normally around 12:30. I've got a list of topics that people have asked me to cover. If there's something you'd like me to cover, then please do let me know in the comments. Until then, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you all very soon. Bye.